Welcome back to the deep dive. We drill down into the sources so you don't have to, and you always walk away well informed. Today, we're jumping into a serious tug of war happening in developmental research, specifically in the world of autism and language. And this isn't just some friendly academic debate. We're talking about a high stakes conflict over who really gets the final say, who defines what's true. We are going deep on Marge Blanc's 2025 response about Gestalt language processing, or GLP, and the natural language acquisition framework. She was pushing back hard against some big critiques. But this was so much more than just a simple rebuttal. Our mission today is to unpack this foundational shift, focusing on something the source calls epistemic boundary work. Okay, let's unpack this. Here's where it gets really interesting. Epistemic boundary work, that's a mouthful, but it basically means redrawing the lines of authority, deciding who gets to hold the knowledge and, how they get to prove it.
And that's exactly what makes this analysis so important. We're looking at her published response from this SIG 01 Language Learning and Education Digest. When something lands in a digest like that, it signals a major reckoning for the entire field. The source material argues Blanc wasn't just, say, defending a methodology. She was actually challenging the entire structure of how knowledge gets validated.
So she's redrawing the map of who's in charge.
Precisely. She was doing that boundary work to protect GLP from being diminished by the academic establishment.
All right, so let's get into the strategy. She's facing this intense, institutionally backed critique, and her first move is a self-imposed constraint. Why would you do that? Why, when you're under pressure, would you intentionally narrow your own claim?
It's a brilliant move, actually. Because if you claim your framework is the key to the universe, you're inviting everyone, neuroscience, cognitive psychology, all of them, to attack it. Blanc knew that to protect NLA, she had to define its limits very, very carefully. And the source material is crystal clear on this one distinction.
Okay, what is it?
She positions NLA strictly as a descriptive account of a developmental trajectory.
A descriptive account?
Yes. It just describes the steps. The observable, verifiable steps that Gestalt processors follow to get to flexible, self-generated language.
And what does that description not do? What does she leave out?
It explicitly is not an explanatory model of mind. It's not trying to be some grand theory of cognition.
Oh.
It's not explaining the deep neurological reasons why the brain works this way. And by limiting it like that, she's essentially telling the critics, your fMRI data, your lab studies on general cognition, they don't apply here.
That's really powerful. It's like a general deciding not to defend the entire coastline.
Right.
But instead concentrating all her forces to hold one crucial defensible harbor. She keeps the fight focused on the outcome, the successful path, not the underlying mechanics.
Exactly. And that self-limitation enables the real pivot. Her refusal to let Gestalt language processing be reduced to what the source calls mere lab constructs.
Which brings us right to that central tension, the core refusal. This idea of resisting the reduction of GLP to a protocol, method, or laboratory-legible construct. If you work with people, you just know that human experience is messy. It's complicated.
It's not linear.
Not at all. And when researchers try to force that messy reality into a neat little experimental box, you lose the very thing you were trying to study in the first place.
And this is where Blanc's precision with her terms becomes so critical. She insists on a really clear separation.
Between what and what?
Between Gestalt language development and Gestalt language processing.
Okay, development versus processing. They sound similar.
They do, but think about it. Processing usually refers to an immediate, isolated cognitive event. How fast you react to a sound in a lab.
An instant.
An instant, exactly. But development, that's the whole long-term story. It spans months, even years.
So by splitting them, she's saying the critics are focusing their magnifying glass on one tiny single frame of the movie. And that one frame can't possibly invalidate the entire film she's describing. So is the source saying she's redefining what counts as valid evidence here?
Absolutely. The primary lens for validity becomes that developmental trajectory. The lived, verifiable sequence of a kid actually succeeding with language. She's basically saying that a single lab test designed for incremental processing, it just doesn't hold up against the evidence of a child successfully moving through the NLA stages over 2 years.
That sets up what feels like the most radical part of this whole thing, the relocation of, epistemic authority? So if you're going to refuse to let the traditional gatekeepers, the labs, the journals, define your work, then who does get to define it?
Well, she moves it. Away from those institutional centers of power, the analysis is very specific. Authority shifts away from institutional gatekeeping and towards something called lived longitudinal coherence.
Okay. Lived longitudinal coherence. That's another powerful phrase. But what does it mean in practice? I mean, who is actually articulating this new authority?
It's the people at the very center of it all. Gestalt language processors and those who support them.
So the kids themselves and their families, their therapists.
Exactly. This is the big flip. It takes the subjective day-to-day experience of communication and elevates it to the status of theoretical evidence. Validity isn't a p-value from a lab anymore. It's the successful construction of a communicative life over the long term.
But hang on, if we're moving authority away from the institutions, the people with the strict protocols, isn't that risky? I mean, how do you stop this from just becoming a collection of anecdotes?
That's the key question, right?
Yeah.
And Blanc isn't arguing for pure subjectivity. The longitudinal coherence is the critical part.
Coherent.
She's pointing to patterns. NLA is a description of a consistent, predictable developmental path. It's been observed over and over again. The coherence of that pattern is what elevates it. It's its own form of rigorous research, just one that traditional journals often dismiss.
I get it. It's like the difference between the map makers and the travelers.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
The institutional academics, they're the map makers. They insist on using their instruments, their protocols, which were all designed for a nice, neat grid system.
Right.
But the Gestalt processors, they're the travelers. They're navigating a totally different kind of terrain. It's nonlinear. And they know the path works because they're walking it successfully every single day.
That is a perfect analogy. And the map makers often only trust the tools they already know how to use. Which leads us right into Blanc's critique of the methods her critics were using.
Okay, so what were their methodological blind spots? What was the tool they were using that she said was just wrong for the job?
Well, Blanc argues they rely almost exclusively on incremental processing research, and that they suffer from methodological narrowing.
Incremental research. So looking at things one tiny little Lego block at a time.
Exactly. Assuming language is built step by step in a straight line. But when you use that narrow method, you automatically exclude the things that are most important for Gestalt development. According to the analysis, Blanc says their approach cuts out, first, the richness of everyday language life.
Real conversations, not lab prompts.
Yes. Second, relational meaning-making, the way language actually connects us to other people. And third, and this is crucial, non-linear developmental time.
Non-linear developmental time. That's a fascinating concept to bring into this debate. It just completely challenges the assumption that learning has to be a steady upward climb.
It does. A Gestalt processor might use a whole chunk of language, a whole Gestalt. It looks like a huge developmental leap.
Right.
Then they might seem to pause, or even go back, to break that chunk down into individual words. That's not a neat linear progression. It's a leap, then a deconstruction. The critic's yardstick can't measure that kind of journey.
And if your tool is fundamentally unable to measure the thing you're studying, then the knowledge it generates is, well, it's not just incomplete, it could be totally irrelevant.
Or even invalid for that population.
Which brings us to the final huge implication here. This idea of promoting something from an anecdote to a full-blown theory.
This is the mic drop moment of her whole response, really.
Yeah.
The ultimate point is that Blanc challenges this deeply held belief that validity can only come from high-prestige journals and experimental abstraction.
Right. Traditionally, an observation from a clinician or a parent, no matter how consistent it is, it's just an anecdote, a nice story that has to wait for the real science to come along and prove it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Blanc just flips that entire hierarchy on its head. The source argues the big shift is that she moves lived GLP from being an anecdote in need of validation to being a site of theory itself. She's arguing the observable, repeatable success of the NLA path is the foundation. And it's science's job, the mapmaker's job, to adapt its tools to fit that reality, not the other way around.
So what does this all mean for you listening, whether you're a clinician or a parent or just interested in this stuff? It means a fundamental change in the hierarchy of knowledge. It changes who we listen to when we decide what's true in this very specialized and very personal field.
It really does.
So today, we unpacked Blanc's 2025 boundary shift. We saw the strategic move to define NLA as a developmental trajectory, protecting it from the wrong kind of critique. And we saw authority move away from abstract protocols and toward lived longitudinal coherence. It validates the experience of Gestalt language processors themselves.
It's a debate about what expertise really is. Does it only belong to the academic who publishes in the journal? Or does it also belong to the individual, the clinician, the parent, the processor, who is living the successful outcome every single day. Blanc's argument is that to really understand the terrain, you have to trust the travelers just as much as you trust the map makers. And for our final thought for you to chew on, if critical thinking is all about questioning our assumptions, how might the profound, observed success of a developmental path, one articulated by the people who actually experience it, how might that force us to completely reevaluate the experimental methods we use, methods that were designed for entirely different, linear cognitive processes? That's something to mull over.
A perfect place to end. Think about that the next time you encounter a new idea. Which kind of authority are you prioritizing in your own learning? The established protocol or the verifiable lived experience? We'll catch you on the next deep dive.